Tonight, as you settle into this quiet moment, something gentle is waiting for you. 13 ancient stories that have whispered peace into restless hearts for over 1,000 years. Stories that know exactly how to quiet the noise in your mind and bring you home to stillness. Each tale carries medicine for the weary spirit, a soft key that opens the door to the calm you've been searching for. These aren't just stories, they're gentle hands reaching through time to soothe whatever heaviness you're carrying tonight. The Buddha knew this truth. Peace lives inside you, always. And right now, wherever you find yourself in this moment, that peace is already here, waiting to be remembered. Perhaps you're listening from a small apartment where the city hums outside your window. Maybe you're in a quiet countryside bedroom where crickets sing their lullabies. Or lying on a couch where the day's worries still cling to your shoulders. No matter where you are, you're safe here with us now. Let your body remember how good it feels to truly rest. Feel the softness beneath you supporting your weight. Notice how your breathing wants to slow down, how your muscles are ready to let go. As these old stories unfold, tales of boats that drift without resistance, monks who find joy in the simplest moments, you'll feel something shifting inside you. Like coming home after a very long journey. Our first story is ready for you now. There once lived a humble monk named Dogen, who spent his days in a small mountain monastery, far from the busy world below. Unlike the other monks who focused only on meditation and chanting, Dogen felt called to preserve the ancient teachings in writing for future generations. He believed that wisdom should flow like water, reaching everyone who thirsted for peace. For 7 years, Dogen worked on a special manuscript. Each morning before dawn, while the other monks slept, he would light a single candle and carefully brush elegant characters onto rice paper. The work was a collection of the deepest Zen teachings he had received from his masters, woven together with his own insights from decades of practice. Every stroke of his brush was a meditation. Every word was chosen with the care a gardener gives to planting seeds. He wrote about the nature of mind, the path to awakening, and the simple practices that could bring peace to anyone willing to listen. The pages grew slowly, like a tree reaching toward light, each section building upon the last in perfect harmony. The manuscript became his treasure, not from pride, but from love. He knew these teachings could help countless people find their way out of suffering. Other monks would sometimes find him asleep at his writing desk, brush still in hand, having worked late into the night by candlelight. As the 7th year drew to a close, Dogen's manuscript was nearly complete. 500 pages of the most profound wisdom ready to be shared with the world. He planned to have it copied and distributed to monasteries throughout Japan, where it could guide seekers for generations to come. One autumn evening, as golden leaves danced outside his window, Dogen put the finishing touches on his life's work. He sat back, feeling a deep satisfaction not from accomplishment, but from service. Tomorrow, he would show the completed manuscript to his abbot and begin the process of sharing it with the world. That night, the mountain winds grew fierce. Ancient trees swayed and creaked like old bones, and the monastery shutters rattled against their frames. Dogen slept peacefully, his precious manuscript resting safely on his writing desk, weighted down with a smooth river stone. But sometime before dawn, a sudden gust burst through his poorly latched window. Papers scattered like white birds taking flight in the darkness. When Dogen woke to the sound of chaos, he found his 7 years of work scattered across the courtyard below, pages swirling in the wind like autumn leaves. By the time he reached the courtyard, most of the pages had blown beyond the monastery walls. A few stragglers clung to bushes and fence posts, but the wind quickly claimed them too. 7 years of careful work, hundreds of hours of devoted writing, disappeared into the mountain wilderness in a matter of minutes. The other monks gathered around Dogen as dawn broke, expecting to find him devastated. Surely anyone would be heartbroken to lose such precious work. They prepared words of comfort and offers to help search for the scattered pages. Instead, they found Dogen standing quietly in the center of the courtyard, watching the last few pages dance away on the morning breeze. His face held no trace of anger, disappointment, or despair. If anything, he seemed to be smiling at something only he could see. "Master Dogen," one young monk said hesitantly, "we're so sorry about your manuscript. All those years of work, lost in one night. Shall we organize a search party to look for the pages?" Dogen turned to the gathered monks with eyes that sparkled with unexpected joy. "Search for what?" he asked gently. "The wind needed those pages more than I did. Who am I to argue with such a thorough distribution method?" The monks stood in confused silence. How could their teacher be so calm about losing his life's work? One elder monk finally asked, "But Master, doesn't this loss pain you? All that wisdom, gone forever?" Dogen laughed softly, the sound like water flowing over stones. "My dear friends, do you think wisdom lives only on paper? Every word I wrote came from here," he said, placing his hand over his heart. "And here it remains, ready to be shared in whatever way the moment calls for." He gestured toward the mountains where his pages had disappeared. Perhaps a bird will line her nest with words about compassion. Maybe a stream will carry teachings about impermanence to the valley below. Or these pages might decompose and nourish the very trees that will one day become paper for someone else's wisdom. The young monk who had offered to search shook his head in amazement. "But Master, if the teachings were so important, how can you let them go so easily?" "Ah," Dogen smiled, "that's exactly the teaching the wind came to offer us this morning. The moment we cling to our creations, we stop creating. The moment we hold our gifts too tightly, we close our hands to giving. My manuscript was meant to teach non-attachment. How perfect that it should demonstrate the lesson so completely." Can you feel the incredible freedom in Dogen's response? Here was a man who had poured 7 years of devoted work into something precious, only to watch it disappear in a single night. Yet instead of clinging to what was lost, he found joy in the lesson it offered. The Buddha taught us, "You are not punished for your anger. You are punished by your anger." Dogen understood this truth perfectly. Raging at the wind for being wind, or mourning endlessly for scattered pages, would only create suffering where none need exist. This is the essence of non-attachment, not caring less about our work or relationships, but holding them lightly enough that we can love them fully without being destroyed when they change. Dogen loved his manuscript deeply, but he loved wisdom itself even more. When the two came into conflict, wisdom won. Most of us live as if our creations, our achievements, our carefully built lives should somehow be permanent. We invest enormous energy trying to protect what we've made from the inevitable forces of change. When loss comes anyway, as it always does, we feel betrayed by life itself. But Dogen had discovered something wonderful. True security doesn't come from grasping our accomplishments, but from trusting our ability to create anew in each moment. The wisdom that produced his manuscript didn't disappear with the pages. It remained alive in his heart, ready to flow into whatever form the next moment might require. In your daily life, notice how tightly you hold your creations. Maybe it's a carefully crafted email that gets misunderstood, a project that gets cancelled, or plans that fall through at the last minute. Do you respond like Dogen, trusting that nothing truly valuable is ever lost? Or do you cling so tightly to specific outcomes that change feels like personal attack? The Buddha said, "Let go of what has passed. Let go of what may come. Let go of what is happening now. Don't try to figure anything out. Don't try to make anything happen. Relax right now and rest." This isn't advice to become passive, but to hold our efforts lightly enough that we can give them freely. Dogen never rewrote his lost manuscript. Instead, he spent the rest of his life teaching directly, person to person, moment to moment. His wisdom spread not through preserved pages, but through transformed hearts. perhaps this was always how it was meant to be shared. Tonight, as you rest in this peaceful space, notice if you're gripping anything too tightly. Maybe it's worry about a project, attachment to how others see you, or resistance to changes happening in your life. Can you offer these concerns the same gentle release that Dogen offered his scattered pages? Feel how good it is to simply rest, without needing to control what tomorrow might bring. This is Dogen's gift to you, the reminder that what matters most can never be lost because it lives not in what we create, but in who we are. Sometimes this inner freedom gets tested in the most surprising ways. In a crowded temple not far from Dogen's mountain, another wise teacher was about to discover just how deep his own peace ran. There lived a Zen master named Bankei who taught something revolutionary for his time. Instead of complicated rituals or difficult practices, he taught about what he called the unborn Buddha mind, the natural awareness that exists in each of us, always peaceful, always present. Bankei's teaching was so simple and powerful that people traveled from far and wide to hear him speak. His temple would fill with hundreds of listeners, farmers and merchants, monks and lay people, all drawn by his gentle wisdom and the peace that seemed to radiate from his very presence. On this particular day, the temple was more crowded than usual. People sat shoulder to shoulder on the wooden floors, while others stood along the walls and even outside the open doors, straining to hear every word. The air was thick with incense and the quiet breathing of hundreds of seekers. Bankei sat serenely at the front of the hall, his voice carrying effortlessly through the space as he spoke about the natural mind that needs no training, no forcing, no struggle. Your Buddha nature is already perfect, he was saying softly. It's like a clear mirror that reflects everything without being stained by anything it shows. The crowd listened in rapt attention, many with tears in their eyes, as they recognized the truth in his words. For the first time, they were hearing that enlightenment wasn't something to achieve through years of difficult practice, but something to recognize in this very moment. Suddenly, from the back of the temple, came a loud, harsh voice that shattered the peaceful atmosphere. "This is nonsense," the voice boomed. "You're misleading these people with your easy teachings." Every head turned to see a fierce-looking priest pushing his way through the crowd. He wore the robes of the Nichiren sect and carried himself with aggressive authority. His face was red with anger, his fists clenched as he advanced toward the front of the temple. "How dare you tell people they don't need to practice?" the priest shouted, his voice echoing off the temple walls. "Buddhism requires discipline, study, devotion. You're making a mockery of the Buddha's teachings." The crowd began to murmur nervously. Some people shifted uncomfortably, looking around for the temple guards. Others seemed frightened by the sudden disruption, their peaceful mood completely shattered. Children pressed closer to their parents, and elderly visitors clutched their prayer beads tightly. But Bankei remained exactly as he was, Not a muscle in his face changed. His breathing stayed calm and even. He looked at the angry priest with the same gentle attention he had been giving to his teaching, as if this interruption was simply another flower blooming in the garden of the moment. "What sect are you from?" Bankei asked quietly, his voice carrying no trace of defensiveness or irritation. "I'm a priest of the Nichiren sect," the man declared proudly, expecting this to intimidate the peaceful teacher. "We follow the true path of the Lotus Sutra, not this watered-down nonsense you're spreading." "Ah," Bankei nodded with genuine interest, as if the priest had just shared something fascinating about the weather. "And when did this angry nature of yours become part of the Nichiren teaching?" The question landed like a pebble in still water, creating ripples of silence throughout the temple. The priest opened his mouth to respond, but found himself speechless. His anger had been so complete, so consuming, that he hadn't even noticed it taking over his entire being. Bankei continued in the same peaceful tone. "You see, right now, you're demonstrating perfectly what I've been teaching about. When we abandon our natural Buddha mind, that place of clear awareness, we get caught up in emotions and reactions. But the mind that recognizes this anger, the awareness that knows you're angry, that part of you is still perfectly calm and unborn." The priest's face began to soften as he felt something shifting inside him. For the first time in the encounter, he became aware of the awareness that was watching his anger. It was like stepping back from a fire and realizing you don't have to stand so close to its heat. "Your anger arises from your thoughts about what Buddhism should be," Bankei explained gently. "But the mind that's aware of those thoughts, that's your true nature. It doesn't need to be improved or trained. It's already perfectly awake, just like the Buddha's mind." The priest stood there, his aggression completely dissolved, experiencing firsthand what Bankei had been teaching. The hundreds of people in the temple sat in amazed silence, witnessing this transformation happen before their eyes. Some began to smile, recognizing their own moments of sudden peace after storms of emotion. Slowly, the priest bowed deeply to Bankei. "Thank you for showing me my original face," he said quietly, using the Zen phrase for our true nature before conditioning covers it over. His voice was now soft, almost childlike in its wonder. As the priest found a place to sit among the other listeners, Bankei turned back to address the entire gathering. This is what the Buddha meant when he said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. In this moment, your awareness is already perfect. It doesn't matter what's happening around you. Your true nature remains undisturbed." Can you feel the incredible peace in Bankei's response? Here was a man so rooted in present moment awareness that even aggressive disruption couldn't pull him out of his natural calm. He didn't fight the interruption or try to control the situation. He simply remained present with whatever was arising. This is the secret of true mindfulness. It's not about making our minds perfectly quiet or avoiding difficult situations. It's about discovering that place in us that can remain peaceful, no matter what storms are raging around us. Most of us live like that angry priest, completely consumed by our reactions to whatever's happening. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and we become the anger. We receive bad news, and we become the worry. Our thoughts about what should or shouldn't be happening take over our entire experience. But Bankei discovered something wonderful. There's a part of us that's aware of all these reactions without being swept away by them. The mind that notices you're angry isn't angry. The awareness that recognizes worry isn't worried. This witnessing consciousness is always present, always calm, always available. When we rest in this awareness, challenges become opportunities to deepen our peace rather than disturbances that destroy it. Like Bankei with the angry priest, we can meet whatever comes with curiosity and compassion instead of resistance and reactivity. The Buddha taught that this present moment is the only place where peace can be found. Not in some future when our problems are solved, not in some idealized past, but right here in the midst of whatever's happening now. Even if what's happening is unpleasant, uncomfortable, or unexpected. This doesn't mean becoming passive or failing to respond appropriately to situations. Bankei responded skillfully to the disruption. He just did it from a place of centered awareness rather than reactive emotion. He turned the interruption into a teaching moment that helped everyone present understand mindfulness more deeply. In your daily life, notice when you become completely identified with your reactions to events. Maybe someone speaks to you rudely and you become the hurt feelings. Perhaps you're running late and you become the stress and frustration. These are natural human responses, but they're not who you really are. The Buddha said, "Peace comes from within, do not seek it without." This peace that Bankei embodied isn't something we have to create or manufacture. It's already here, waiting beneath the surface of our reactions and judgments. Tonight, as you rest here in this peaceful space, see if you can find that quiet awareness that Bankei knew so well. It's the part of you that's been listening to these stories without judgment. The gentle witness that notices your thoughts and feelings without being disturbed by them. This is your unborn Buddha mind, always present, always peaceful, always home. And somewhere in the gentle rhythm of your breathing, another story waits to unfold. There once lived a Zen master named Sagan, who had spent 30 years building a beautiful temple in the mountains. Every wooden beam had been carefully chosen, every garden stone placed with meditation and love. It was his life's work, and pilgrims came from far away just to experience the peace that seemed to flow from every corner of this sacred place. The temple sat like a jewel among ancient pines, its curved roofs echoing the mountain peaks beyond. Inside, golden Buddha statues smiled peacefully in halls where thousands had found refuge from their troubles. The library held scrolls copied by monks over centuries, each character written with devotional care. Gardens flowed around the buildings like gentle rivers, with stone paths worn smooth by countless feet, seeking wisdom. Master Sagan had overseen every detail of the temple's construction. He had chosen each piece of wood personally, feeling for the grain that would age beautifully over time. He had positioned every rock in the gardens, creating spaces where morning light would fall just so, where evening shadows would invite contemplation. This was more than a building. It was a physical expression of 3 decades of spiritual practice and devotion. One summer night, a fierce storm rolled across the mountains. Thunder crashed like giant drums, and lightning split the sky in brilliant white flashes. The rain fell in sheets so thick it seemed like the mountain itself was weeping. Then, in one brilliant moment, lightning struck the ancient pine tree that had stood guard beside the temple for over 300 years. The massive tree, its trunk wide enough for 6 people to embrace, began to burn like a giant torch against the dark sky. Within minutes, sparks had carried to the temple's wooden roof. The building that had taken 30 years to create became a blazing inferno in less than an hour. The meditation hall, where thousands had found peace, the library with its irreplaceable texts, the living quarters where monks had slept safely for decades, all disappeared into flames that reached toward the storm clouds. By dawn, everything was ash and smoking timber. The rain had finally stopped, and mist rose from the blackened ruins like incense from a cosmic altar. Where beauty and order had reigned just hours before, only destruction remained. When the villagers heard the news, they climbed the mountain path with heavy hearts. They had loved this temple too. It had been the spiritual heart of their community, the place where their children received blessings and their elders found comfort in their final years. They expected to find Master Sagan overwhelmed with grief, perhaps weeping among the ruins of his life's work. Instead, they discovered him sitting peacefully on a large stone that had somehow remained untouched by the fire. He was drinking tea from a simple clay cup that had apparently survived the conflagration, steam rising gently from the warm liquid in the cool morning air. His face showed neither despair nor bitter resignation. If anything, he seemed to be contemplating the scene before him with the same peaceful attention he had once given to arranging flowers for the altar. "Master," one villager said, with tears streaming down his face, "we're so sorry for your terrible loss. 30 years of work, destroyed in one night. All those precious scrolls, the beautiful statues, the meditation hall where we found so much peace. How devastating this must be for you." Sagan looked up with gentle eyes that held no trace of bitterness or despair. He gestured toward the smouldering remains with one hand, while holding his teacup steady with the other. "The fire burned what it burned," he said simply. "The sadness is sadness. But why should I burn too?" The villagers stood in stunned silence, trying to understand how anyone could face such devastating loss with such equanimity. One young man finally asked, "But Master, doesn't this hurt?" Don't you feel angry about losing everything? Sagan smiled gently and took another sip of his tea. Of course it hurts, he said. Sadness is natural when something beautiful passes away. But if I spend my energy being angry at lightning for being lightning, or fire for being fire, then I am adding unnecessary burning to what is already burned. He stood and walked closer to the ruins, his footsteps crunching softly on charred debris. The temple served its purpose beautifully for 30 years, he continued. It gave shelter to seekers, peace to the troubled, and beauty to all who visited. That service was complete the moment the fire began. Why should I torture myself by demanding it serve longer? Can you feel the profound wisdom in Master Sagan's response? He had discovered what the Buddha called the teaching of the two arrows, the difference between inevitable pain and unnecessary suffering. The Buddha taught us pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. The first arrow is what life shoots at us: loss, disappointment, illness, change. These experiences are part of being human, and trying to avoid them entirely is both impossible and unwise. But the second arrow is what we shoot at ourselves, our mental reactions to what has already happened, our anger at reality for being reality, our demands that the past should have been different, our resistance to accepting what we cannot change. Sagan faced the first arrow of his temple burning down. This was genuinely painful. 30 years of devoted work reduced to ash in a single night. But he chose not to shoot the second arrow of bitter resentment, rage at the unfairness of life, or self-pity about his loss. Most of us live our entire lives being pierced again and again by second arrows of our own making. Someone speaks harshly to us, and instead of just feeling the natural sting of criticism, we spend days rehearsing angry responses. We make a mistake at work, and rather than simply learning from it, we torture ourselves with shame and self-criticism. Plans fall through, and instead of adapting, we waste energy fuming about how things should have gone differently. The Buddha said, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Sagan understood this perfectly. The temple had already burned. Why burn himself as well with rage and resistance? This acceptance doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent to loss. Sagan felt genuine sadness about his temple. He acknowledged the natural human response to losing something precious. But he didn't compound that natural grief with the additional suffering of fighting against what had already occurred. In your daily life, notice how often you shoot second arrows at yourself. Traffic makes you late for an important meeting. That's the first arrow. Spending the rest of the day angry about traffic patterns you can't control. That's the second arrow. A relationship ends painfully. That's the first arrow. Months of bitter rumination about what you should have done differently. That's the second arrow. The practice of recognizing these two arrows can transform your relationship with difficulty. When challenging situations arise, you can ask yourself, what is the unavoidable first arrow here, and what second arrows am I adding? Master Sagan's tea ceremony in the ruins teaches us something beautiful about acceptance. He didn't pretend the loss hadn't happened or try to minimize its significance. Instead, he met the situation exactly as it was, finding peace not by changing his circumstances, but by changing his relationship to them. The Buddha taught, "What we resist persists." When we fight against what has already happened, we keep ourselves trapped in suffering. But when we accept the first arrow without adding second arrows, we create space for wisdom, healing, and appropriate action. Tonight, as you rest in this peaceful moment, notice if you're carrying any second arrows from your day. Perhaps you're still mentally arguing with something someone said, or replaying a mistake you made. Can you feel the difference between the natural, clean pain of the first arrow and the burning you've added with your thoughts? Like Master Sagan, with his simple cup of tea, you can choose to stop feeding the flames of resistance and simply be present with what is. Sometimes, in that space of acceptance, we discover that what seemed like an ending was actually preparing the ground for something new to grow. There once lived a monk named Joshu who would become one of the most beloved Zen masters in history. But his story began not with sudden enlightenment or miraculous insight, but with something much rarer, the willingness to learn slowly, patiently, like a gardener watching seeds grow in their own perfect time. When Joshu first arrived at Master Nansen's monastery, he was already 60 years old. Most people his age were considered elders, expected to share wisdom rather than seek it. But Joshu came with empty hands and a beginner's heart, ready to start his spiritual journey when others might think it was too late to begin anything new. The younger monks whispered among themselves about this unusual newcomer. "Why is that old man here?" they wondered. "Shouldn't he already know what he needs to know by now?" Some felt embarrassed for him, thinking he must be desperate or confused to start studying so late in life. But Joshu paid no attention to their whispers. Each morning, he rose before dawn with the enthusiasm of a child, eager for whatever the day might teach him. He swept floors with the same care he gave to listening to lectures. He asked questions that others considered beneath them, and he practiced basic meditation techniques with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. Master Nansen watched this unusual student with growing respect. While younger monks often rush through their practices, hungry for quick results and dramatic breakthroughs, Joshu approached each lesson like a gardener tending seedlings. He seemed to understand that wisdom, like good soil, needed time to develop its richness. Years passed, and Joshu continued his studies. When he was 65, still considered a beginning student, other monks his age were leading their own temples. When he was 70, friends from his former life wondered why he didn't return to a more comfortable retirement. When he was 75, Even some of his teachers suggested he might want to rest from his studies and simply enjoy his remaining years. But Joshu only smiled and continued learning. Every day, he would say, "I discover how much I don't know." This is the most exciting discovery of all. One spring morning, when Joshu was nearly 80 years old, a visiting master came to test the monastery's students. He gathered everyone in the main hall and began asking challenging questions about the deepest aspects of Zen teaching. One by one, the younger monks offered confident answers, eager to display their knowledge and insight. When the visitor came to Joshu, sitting quietly in the back with the newest students, he asked, "Old man, you've been here longer than most of these young monks. What profound wisdom have you gained from all these years of study?" Joshu looked up with eyes that sparkled with genuine delight. "Sir," he said, "I have learned the most wonderful thing. Every person I meet knows something I don't know. Every moment contains a teaching I haven't yet received. Even after 20 years of study, I am still just a beginner, and this fills me with such joy." The visiting master was stunned into silence. In all his travels, testing students at monasteries throughout the country, he had never heard an answer that contained such profound humility and genuine wisdom. The younger monks, who had given clever answers about emptiness and Buddha nature, suddenly felt very small beside this old man's simple honesty. "Tell me," the visitor continued, "don't you feel you've wasted time studying so slowly? Most masters achieve enlightenment much younger than you are now." Joshu laughed gently, the sound like water flowing over smooth stones. "Wasted time?" he repeated. "Sir, if I had rushed toward enlightenment like picking fruit before it's ripe, I would have missed the sweetness that comes only with patience. Time has not been my enemy. It has been my greatest teacher." That evening, Master Nansen called Joshu to his private quarters. "My old friend," he said, "you have been my student for 20 years, and in all that time, you have never claimed to understand anything completely. This itself is complete understanding." From that day forward, students began seeking out Joshu for guidance. They found in him something rare, a teacher who had learned the difference between knowing about wisdom and embodying it. He had allowed understanding to ripen slowly in his heart, like fruit growing sweet in its own season. When Joshu finally began teaching at the age of 80, his words carried the weight of patient practice. Students would travel for weeks just to hear him speak, not because he offered dramatic insights, but because his presence itself taught them about the beauty of unhurried growth. One day, a young monk approached him with familiar frustration. "Master Joshu," the student said, "I've been practicing for 3 years now, and I still don't feel enlightened. Maybe I'm not meant for this path. Maybe I should give up and find something I'm better at." Joshu invited the young man to walk with him in the monastery garden. They stopped beside an ancient pine tree that towered above all the other plants. "Tell me," Joshu said, "how long do you think this tree has been growing?" The student looked up at the magnificent tree its trunk wide and its branches reaching toward the sky, like arms embracing the clouds. Maybe 100 years, he guessed. More than that, Joshu said gently. This tree has been growing for over 200 years. Do you think it ever felt frustrated that it wasn't tall enough after only 3 years? Do you think it ever considered giving up because it wasn't growing fast enough? The young monk began to understand. But Master, how do I learn to be as patient as a tree? By remembering that you are not racing against time, Joshu replied. You are dancing with it. The Buddha said, drop by drop is the water pot filled. Wisdom comes not in great floods, but in gentle, steady drops, each one precious. Can you feel the profound peace in Joshu's approach to learning? In a world that demands instant results and quick fixes, he discovered the joy of slow, steady growth. He understood that rushing toward enlightenment is like trying to force a flower to bloom. You might succeed in opening the petals, but you'll miss the natural beauty of gradual unfolding. Most of us treat time as our enemy. We feel frustrated when changes don't happen quickly enough, anxious when results don't match our timelines, and discouraged when progress feels slow. We live as if patience were a weakness, rather than recognizing it as one of the greatest strengths we can develop. But Joshu had discovered something wonderful. When we stop fighting against time's natural rhythm, we begin to flow with it. Instead of feeling rushed and pressured, we can relax into the understanding that everything worthwhile takes time to develop properly. The Buddha taught, there are 2 mistakes one can make along the road to truth: not going all the way and not starting. Joshu's story shows us a third mistake we often make: rushing so quickly toward the destination that we miss the beauty of the journey itself. Think about the areas in your life where you feel impatient for change. Maybe you're frustrated with how slowly you're learning a new skill, or disappointed that a relationship isn't improving as quickly as you hoped. Perhaps you're discouraged because personal healing or growth feels like it's taking forever. Joshu would remind you that this impatience itself is something to be patient with. Like a gardener who doesn't pull up plants to check if their roots are growing, we can trust that progress is happening even when we can't see it. In Japanese gardens, there's a principle called borrowed scenery, the art of incorporating distant mountains or trees into the garden's design, recognizing that beauty includes what lies beyond our immediate control. Joshu lived this principle, understanding that his spiritual journey included not just what he could force to happen, but what was naturally unfolding in its own perfect timing. The Buddha said, "Patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet." Joshu tasted this sweetness every day of his long learning journey. He discovered that when we stop demanding immediate results, we can actually enjoy the process of growth itself. Tonight, as you rest in this moment, can you feel some of Joshu's patient acceptance settling into your bones? Can you trust that whatever you're working on in your life, healing, learning, growing, changing, is unfolding exactly as it needs to? Can you make friends with time instead of feeling like you're racing against it? This doesn't mean becoming passive or stopping your efforts. Joshu studied diligently every day for 20 years. But he did so with the patient joy of a gardener who knows that seeds planted with love will sprout when the conditions are right. Sometimes the most profound lessons come wrapped in the simplest packages, waiting quietly for us to notice their extraordinary beauty. There once lived a Zen master named Ikkyu, who was known throughout Japan not for his grand temples or elaborate ceremonies, but for his complete disregard of anything that wasn't absolutely necessary. While other monks wore their finest robes to impress visitors, Ikkyu could often be found tending his small garden in clothes so patched and faded that beggars might have pitied him. Yet his simple presence carried more peace than 100 golden statues. Ikkyu lived in a tiny hut on the outskirts of a bustling city. His home contained almost nothing: a sleeping mat, a few bowls, some writing brushes, and a small iron kettle for making tea. Visitors often expected to find the dwelling of a famous master filled with precious artifacts and beautiful decorations. Instead, they discovered a space so empty it seemed to breathe with contentment. The simplicity wasn't poverty, it was choice. Ikkyu had grown up in the imperial court, surrounded by luxury and ceremony. He knew the weight of silk robes, the taste of elaborate feasts, and the exhausting effort required to maintain appearances. But somewhere along his journey, he had discovered that the most precious things in life couldn't be bought, displayed, or impressed upon others. One spring morning, a messenger arrived at Ikkyu's humble hut with an elegant scroll sealed in gold. The emperor himself was hosting a grand banquet to honor the nation's most respected spiritual teachers. Ikkyu was invited to join the celebration at the imperial palace, where the finest food, wine, and entertainment would be provided. The messenger, dressed in elaborate court attire, looked around Ikkyu's simple dwelling with barely concealed disdain. "Master Ikkyu," he said formally, "His Imperial Majesty requests your presence at tomorrow evening's feast. This is a great honor, reserved only for the most esteemed teachers in the realm." Ikkyu accepted the invitation with a gentle bow, but he felt no excitement about the prospect of such formal grandeur. Still, he recognized that refusing might seem ungrateful, and he was curious to see what he might learn from this experience. The next evening, Ikkyu made his way to the imperial palace. He wore his usual clothes, a simple brown robe that he used for gardening, meditation, and everything else in his uncomplicated life. The fabric was clean but worn, patched in several places with loving care. His sandals were plain straw, and he carried nothing but a small cloth bag containing a few tea leaves. When Ikkyu arrived at the palace gates, the guards looked him up and down with confusion. Surely this shabby-looking person couldn't be one of the honored guests expected at tonight's imperial banquet. "Excuse me," one guard said politely but firmly. "This entrance is reserved for invited dignitaries. The servants' entrance is around the back." Ikkyu smiled gently and showed them his golden invitation. The guards examined it carefully, then looked back at his simple appearance with growing embarrassment. "Sir, this is quite irregular. Perhaps you could return home and change into more appropriate attire." "Ah," Ikkyu nodded with understanding. "I see the problem." Without any irritation or argument, he bowed politely and walked away. The guards expected never to see him again. But within an hour, a magnificent figure approached the palace gates. The man wore robes of the finest silk, embroidered with golden threads that caught the lamplight beautifully. His sleeves were so long and elaborate they seemed to float like clouds around his arms. A jeweled hat sat perfectly on his head, and expensive sandals graced his feet. "Welcome, honored master," the guards exclaimed, bowing deeply as they recognized the same invitation now presented by hands adorned with ceremonial rings. They escorted this splendidly dressed figure through the palace corridors with great respect. Inside the banquet hall, hundreds of guests sat on silk cushions around low tables, laden with the most exquisite foods. Golden bowls held delicacies from across the empire, while servants moved gracefully between the guests, pouring rare wines and ensuring every comfort. The emperor himself sat at the head of the hall, surrounded by the most important ministers and spiritual advisors in the land. When the magnificently dressed Ikkyu entered, conversations paused as people admired his impressive appearance. He was seated in a place of honor, close to the emperor, where his beautiful robes could be properly appreciated by all the assembled dignitaries. As the feast began, servants brought course after course of elaborate dishes to Ikkyu's table. But instead of eating the food himself, he began lifting each delicacy to his sleeves. "Please eat," he said politely to the embroidered fabric. "This wonderful feast is clearly meant for you." He dipped the sleeves into bowls of soup, offered them pieces of fish, and carefully placed rice near the golden threads. "Such beautiful clothes deserve such beautiful food," he murmured, continuing to feed his elaborate garments while ignoring the meal himself. The other guests began to stare in bewilderment. Some whispered among themselves, wondering if the honored master had lost his mind. Others sat in embarrassed silence, unsure how to respond to such strange behavior. Finally, a brave court official leaned over and asked quietly, "Master Ikkyu, forgive me, but why are you feeding your clothes instead of eating?" Ikkyu looked up with sparkling eyes and a gentle smile. "When I came here earlier in my simple robes, I was turned away at the gate. But when I returned, wearing these borrowed finery, I was welcomed with great honor and seated at the finest table. Clearly, it was these clothes that were invited to dinner, not me." A hush fell over the banquet hall as his words sank in. People began to understand the profound lesson hidden in what had seemed like madness. They had been so focused on appearances that they had completely missed the person beneath the clothes. The emperor himself rose from his seat and walked to where Ikkyu sat. "Master," he said with genuine humility, "you have taught us all something important tonight. Please, join me at my table and let us honor the teacher, not the garments." Ikkyu smiled and carefully removed the borrowed robes, revealing his simple brown robe underneath. As he folded the elaborate clothes with respect, he said, "These beautiful things served their purpose perfectly. Now, let them rest while we share what really matters: good food, honest conversation, and the simple joy of being together." Can you feel the gentle wisdom in Ikkyu's playful lesson? He had discovered that true value lies not in what we wear, own, or display, but in the quality of presence we bring to each moment. His simple robe and borrowed finery were both just costumes. What mattered was the awakened heart wearing them. The Buddha taught, "Contentment is natural wealth. Luxury is artificial poverty." Ikkyu embodied this truth completely. While others exhausted themselves pursuing more elaborate possessions, he found richness in having just enough. Most of us live in societies that constantly tell us we need more to be happy. More clothes, more gadgets, more impressive homes, more status symbols to show the world our worth. We can spend our entire lives accumulating things that never quite satisfy the longing for contentment. But Ikkyu had discovered the secret that simplicity teachers throughout history have known. When we stop chasing after more, we can finally appreciate what we already have. His small hut wasn't a limitation. It was freedom from the burden of maintaining unnecessary possessions. His simple robe wasn't poverty. It was liberation from the exhausting task of constantly managing his image. The lesson of the sleeve feeding goes deeper than just a critique of materialism. It reveals how easily we can mistake appearances for reality in every area of life. We judge people by their clothes, their jobs, their neighborhoods, their possessions, all while missing the actual human being standing before us. Think about your own relationship with stuff. How much time do you spend maintaining, organizing, shopping for, or worrying about your possessions? How often do you feel pressure to look a certain way or own certain things to be accepted by others? How much energy goes into managing your image instead of simply being yourself? Ikkyu's simplicity wasn't about deprivation. It was about clarity. When you own fewer things, you can appreciate each one more deeply. When you stop worrying about appearances, you can focus on substance. When you release the need to impress others, you discover the joy of authentic connection. The Buddha said, "Few are there among men who cross to the further shore. Most people run up and down on this side of the bank." Ikkyu had crossed to that further shore, where contentment doesn't depend on external circumstances. This doesn't mean we should all live in empty huts or wear only simple robes. It means we can enjoy beautiful things without needing them for our happiness. We can appreciate luxury without becoming slaves to it. We can have possessions without being possessed by them. In your daily life, notice when you feel the pull toward unnecessary complexity. Maybe it's buying things you don't really need, or feeling pressured to keep up with others' lifestyle choices. Perhaps it's maintaining relationships or commitments that drain your energy without adding real value to your life. Tonight, as you rest in this simple moment, can you feel some of Ikkyu's contentment settling into your awareness? Can you appreciate the beauty of having just enough comfort, enough warmth, enough peace? Can you recognize the richness that's already present when we stop chasing after more? True simplicity isn't about having less. It's about needing less to feel complete. And in that completion, there's often room for the most unexpected gifts to appear. There lived a monk named Ryokan, whose heart had never forgotten how to play. While other teachers spent their days in serious study and formal meditation, Ryokan could often be found laughing with the village children, joining their games with the pure joy of someone who had discovered that wisdom and wonder were the same thing. Ryokan's small hut sat at the edge of a mountain village, close enough that children could easily visit him after their morning chores were done. Unlike the stern monks they sometimes encountered at the main temple, Ryokan never scolded them for being too loud or told them to sit still and be serious. Instead, he would greet each child as if they were bringing him the most precious gift in the world, which, in his eyes, they were. The village children adored this gentle monk, who seemed to understand their world perfectly. He knew which games were the most fun, could tell stories that made them gasp with excitement, and always had time to listen to their worries and joys with complete attention. Parents often found their little ones talking about Uncle Ryokan with the same reverence other children might reserve for fairy tale heroes. One warm summer afternoon, a group of 6 children climbed the mountain path to visit Ryokan. They found him sitting in his garden, writing poetry on small pieces of paper that he would sometimes give away to visitors. When he saw them approaching, his face lit up with genuine delight, and he immediately set aside his brush. "Uncle Ryokan," called out May, a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and tangled hair. "Will you play hide and seek with us? We've been practicing all week, and we're getting really good at finding the best hiding spots." Ryokan clapped his hands together with enthusiasm. What a wonderful idea. There's nothing I'd rather do on such a beautiful day than play hide and seek with my favorite teachers. "Teachers?" laughed Taro, an 8-year-old boy who was missing his 2 front teeth. "We're not teachers, Uncle Ryokan. We're just kids." "Ah," Ryokan winked. "That's exactly why you're the best teachers of all. You remember how to find joy in simple things, how to love without conditions, and how to live completely in this moment. Those are the most important lessons anyone can learn." The children giggled and gathered in a circle to decide who would be it first. After much discussion and a game of rock, paper, scissors, young Kenji was chosen to count while everyone else hid. The playing area would include Ryokan's garden, the surrounding pine trees, and the small storage shed behind his hut. "Count to 50, the children called out as they scattered in different directions, looking for the perfect hiding spots. Ryokan watched them for a moment, noting how each child had their own strategy, some seeking the most obvious places, others determined to find completely invisible locations. As Kenji began counting loudly, 1, 2, 3, Ryokan looked around for his own hiding place. He spotted a large wooden barrel that had been used for collecting rainwater, sitting partially behind his storage shed. It looked like it would provide excellent cover, so he quietly made his way over and crouched down behind it. The hiding spot was perfect, completely concealed from the main playing area. Ryokan settled in comfortably, listening to Kenji's counting grow closer to 50. Soon he heard the boy shout, "Ready or not, here I come," followed by the sounds of excited searching and occasional squeals of discovery. One by one, Ryokan heard his young friends being found. First came Mei's delighted shriek, as Kenji discovered her behind a pine tree. Then Taro was caught trying to squeeze behind a pile of firewood. The other children were found in quick succession, their laughter echoing through the mountain air as they joined the search for the remaining hiders. But Ryokan's hiding spot was so good that the children couldn't find him anywhere. He could hear them calling his name, their voices growing more puzzled as they searched every obvious location. "Uncle Ryokan, where are you?" they called. "We give up. You win." Still, Ryokan remained hidden. Not because he wanted to win the game, but because something beautiful was happening in his hiding place. Crouched behind the barrel, surrounded by the simple wooden walls of his storage shed, he felt a profound sense of peace. The children's laughter, the afternoon breeze rustling through pine needles, the feeling of being perfectly hidden, yet completely connected to the joy around him. It all felt like meditation in motion. Time passed differently in that hidden space. Minutes felt like hours, or perhaps hours felt like minutes. Ryokan found himself entering a state of deep contentment, listening to the children's voices grow more distant as they expanded their search. The afternoon sun moved across the sky, painting different patterns of light and shadow around the storage shed. Still, Ryokan remained in his hiding place, not from stubbornness or a desire to win, but from a growing sense that this moment was teaching him something important about the nature of love and presence. As evening approached and the mountain air grew cooler, the children's voices gradually faded. Their parents had called them home for dinner, and they had reluctantly given up their search for their beloved Uncle Ryokan. "He must have gone inside," Mei said as they started down the mountain path. "We'll find him next time." But Ryokan remained behind the barrel, now lost in such deep meditation that he barely noticed the transition from day to night. The stars appeared overhead, and a gentle moon cast silver light across the mountain. Still, the monk stayed in his hiding place, experiencing a profound unity with the simple wooden barrel, the quiet night, and the memory of children's laughter still echoing in his heart. It wasn't until the first light of dawn touched the mountain peaks that Ryokan finally emerged from behind the barrel. He had spent the entire night in hiding, not because he was stuck or confused, but because the game had transformed into something sacred. In trying to hide from the children, he had found something beautiful, a night of perfect solitude that somehow felt completely connected to love. When the children returned the next morning, they found Ryokan sitting in his garden as usual, writing poetry with a peaceful smile on his face. "Uncle Ryokan," Mei called out. "Where did you go yesterday? We looked everywhere for you." Ryokan looked up with sparkling eyes. "I was hiding right where you left me," he said gently. Sometimes the best hiding places are so good that even we forget we're in them. "But we searched all night," Taro protested. "Our parents even helped us look for you before dinner." "And I heard every loving call," Ryokan replied. "Even hidden behind a barrel, I felt completely surrounded by your care." This is what the Buddha meant when he said, "Loving kindness is a gift that costs nothing, but has infinite value. Your concern for me was a treasure more precious than being found." Can you feel the profound compassion in Ryokan's heart? His willingness to play with children wasn't just kindness, it was recognition that joy, love, and wonder are the most natural expressions of our true nature. He understood that every moment offers us a choice between connection and separation, between opening our hearts or protecting them. The Buddha taught, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Ryokan lived this teaching so completely that compassion had become as natural as breathing. He didn't have to think about being kind to children. Kindness flowed from him like water from a spring. Most adults gradually lose touch with the spontaneous love that children express so naturally. We learn to be careful with our affection, to guard our hearts, to question whether others deserve our kindness. We develop complicated ideas about appropriate behavior, professional boundaries, and social expectations that often separate us from simple human connection. But Ryokan had never forgotten that underneath all our adult complications, we are still the same loving beings we were as children. The capacity for innocent joy, generous affection, and unconditional care never really disappears. It just gets buried under layers of conditioning and caution. His night behind the barrel reveals something beautiful about the nature of true compassion. Even when hidden, even when alone, he remained connected to the love the children had shown him. This is how genuine kindness works. It doesn't depend on being seen, appreciated, or rewarded. It flows naturally from hearts that have remembered their original goodness. Think about your own relationship with spontaneous kindness. When did you last feel the uncomplicated joy of making someone else happy just for the sake of their happiness? How often do you allow yourself to be playful, to connect with others without agenda or expectation? The children in Ryokan's story loved him not because he was wise or holy, but because he met them with complete presence and genuine delight. They felt safe to be themselves around him because he had never stopped being himself, a being whose natural state was loving kindness. The Buddha said, "Hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is a law eternal. Ryokan understood that the same principle applies to love. Love is awakened, not by demanding it, but by expressing it freely. In your daily interactions, notice when you have opportunities to practice Ryokan's kind of natural compassion. Maybe it's giving someone your complete attention when they're speaking, or offering help without being asked. Perhaps it's approaching someone who seems lonely, or simply smiling at strangers with genuine warmth. Tonight, as you rest in this peaceful space, can you feel that place in your heart that remembers how to love like a child? Can you sense the joy that comes not from being loved, but from loving? Can you touch that part of yourself that, like Ryokan, finds happiness in making others happy? This innocent capacity for kindness isn't something we need to create. It's something we need to remember. And sometimes the most profound wisdom comes disguised as the simplest play. In ancient China, there lived a Zen master named Dongshan, who had a gift for pointing people toward truth in the most unexpected ways. Students would travel for months to ask him the deepest questions about existence, seeking profound answers that would unlock the mysteries of enlightenment. But Dongshan had discovered that the most profound truths were often hiding in the most ordinary moments. Dongshan's monastery sat nestled in rolling hills, where farmers grew crops that fed the surrounding villages. The monks supported themselves partly through their own farming, and partly by processing flax into fabric for simple robes and household goods. It was honest, practical work that kept their hands busy while their minds remained clear and present. Every morning, Dongshan could be found working alongside his students, whether they were planting seeds, tending vegetables, or preparing the flax for weaving. He moved through these tasks with the same gentle attention he brought to meditation, finding no difference between sacred practice and daily work. For him, every moment was an opportunity to wake up to what was already here. One autumn afternoon, as golden light streamed through the monastery windows, Dongshan was working in the flax preparation room. The harvest had been good that year, and bundles of the plant filled the room with their earthy, honest smell. He was weighing portions for the day's work, using an old balance scale that had served the monastery for decades. A young monk who had recently arrived at the monastery approached his teacher with burning urgency. This student had spent years studying Buddhist texts, memorizing sutras, and analyzing different philosophical schools. His mind was full of concepts about emptiness, Buddha nature, and enlightenment, but somehow, all this knowledge felt disconnected from actual understanding. "Master Dongshan," the young monk said, bowing deeply before his teacher, "I have a question that has been troubling me for months. I've read that everything in existence has Buddha nature, that all beings and all things are expressions of the same ultimate reality." Dongshan continued weighing the flax, giving the student his complete attention while continuing his simple work. The balance scale creaked softly as he adjusted the weights, completely absorbed in the task at hand. "But Master," the student continued, his voice filled with philosophical urgency. I cannot understand what this really means. When I look around, I see only ordinary things, buildings, plants, tools, people going about their daily business. Where is this Buddha nature that the texts describe? What is Buddha, really? Dongshan paused in his weighing, but only for a moment. Without looking up from his work, without any dramatic pause or mystical gesture, he simply said, 3 pounds of flax. The student stood there in stunned silence. He had expected a profound explanation, perhaps a reference to ancient teachings, or a poetic metaphor that would illuminate the deepest mysteries of existence. Instead, his teacher had answered with the most mundane fact imaginable, the weight of the plant material sitting right there on the scale. I don't understand, Master, the student said, his voice betraying both confusion and disappointment. I asked about the nature of Buddha, about ultimate reality, about the deepest truths of existence. Why do you tell me about flax? Dongshan finally looked up from his scale, his eyes twinkling with gentle amusement. What were you expecting me to say? He asked kindly. Did you want me to point towards some distant Buddha that exists somewhere else, in some other time? The student shifted uncomfortably. Well, yes. I was hoping for some insight that would help me understand what Buddha nature really is, where to find it, how to recognize it. And here you are, Dongshan smiled, standing in a room full of Buddha nature, asking where Buddha nature can be found. He gestured toward the bundles of flax, the wooden scale, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window. 3 pounds of flax is exactly Buddha nature. Nothing hidden, nothing special, nothing somewhere else. But Master, the student protested, surely Buddha nature is more than just things. Surely it's something spiritual, something transcendent. Dongshan picked up a handful of the processed flax, letting it run through his fingers like water. What makes you think this isn't spiritual? He asked gently. What makes you think the ordinary world around you isn't the very enlightenment you're seeking? The young monk stared at the flax falling from his teacher's hand, and something began to shift in his understanding. For months, he had been searching for Buddha nature, as if it were hidden treasure buried somewhere far away. But Dongshan was showing him that what he sought was never absent, never concealed, never anywhere, but right here, in the immediate reality of this moment. The Buddha said, "If you cannot find the truth right where you are, where else do you expect to find it?" Dongshan continued his work, weighing another portion of flax. 3 pounds of flax contains no more and no less Buddha nature than the most golden statue or the most sacred text. The difference is not in the object, it's in how clearly you see. Can you feel the profound simplicity in Dongshan's teaching? He had cut through all the students' complicated concepts and philosophical searching with 3 words that pointed directly to what was immediately present. The flax wasn't a symbol of Buddha nature. It was Buddha nature, complete and perfect, just as it was. Most of us live like that confused student, constantly seeking something special, something more meaningful than our ordinary experience. We read spiritual books looking for secret knowledge, attend workshops, hoping for breakthrough experiences, and meditate waiting for special states of consciousness. All the while, we overlook the miracle of what's already here. The Buddha taught, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Dongshan's 3 pounds of flax was exactly such a word, simple, direct, and pointing immediately to reality without any detours through concepts or philosophy. This is the essence of true insight, not accumulating more knowledge about reality, but seeing clearly what's already present. The student was asking about Buddha nature while surrounded by it, seeking enlightenment while standing in its very presence. His spiritual seeking had become a barrier to spiritual seeing. In your own life, notice when you fall into the same pattern of seeking something special while missing what's ordinary. Maybe you're waiting for a perfect relationship while overlooking the love that's already available. Perhaps you're searching for meaningful work while missing opportunities for purpose in your current situation. Or you might be seeking inner peace while ignoring the quiet moments that are already peaceful. Dongshan's teaching reveals that enlightenment isn't about having special experiences. It's about recognizing the sacred nature of all experience. The cup you drink from, the air you breathe, the ground beneath your feet, all of this is the very Buddha nature that spiritual seekers travel the world trying to find. The Buddha said, when you realize how perfect everything is, you will tilt your head back and laugh at the sky. This perfection includes the flax being weighed, the student asking questions, and the teacher pointing toward what was never hidden. The most profound insights often come not as dramatic revelations, but as gentle recognitions of what we've been overlooking. Like the student discovering that Buddha nature was never absent from ordinary flax, we can awaken to the sacred that permeates every moment of our supposedly mundane lives. Tonight, as you rest in this simple awareness, can you sense the 3 pounds of flax quality in your immediate experience? Can you feel how the breath moving through your body, the sensation of resting, the act of listening itself, are all expressions of the same presence you might be seeking somewhere else? Can you recognize that what you're looking for is what's already looking? This recognition doesn't require special knowledge or years of practice. It simply asks for eyes that see what was never actually hidden. Sometimes the most obvious truths are the hardest to accept, especially when they arrive wrapped in such ordinary packages. Master Ikkyu had lived 91 years, with the same playful simplicity that had made him beloved throughout Japan. Even as his body grew frail and his hair turned white as winter snow, his eyes still sparkled with the mischievous joy of someone who had never lost touch with the wonder of being alive. Now, as autumn painted the mountains in brilliant colors, everyone could sense that his final season was approaching. Ikkyu spent his last weeks, much as he had spent all the years before, writing poetry, tending his small garden, and welcoming visitors with the same warm presence that had drawn people to him for decades. Students and friends came from distant provinces to spend time with their beloved teacher, each hoping to receive some final words of wisdom to carry forward. The old master received each visitor with genuine delight, as if their arrival was the most wonderful surprise. He served them tea with hands that trembled slightly but moved with the same careful attention he had always given to simple ceremonies. His conversations meandered through poetry, philosophy, and gentle teasing, but never lingered on the fact that these meetings would likely be their last. One crisp morning in late October, Ikkyu woke feeling different than usual. Not sick exactly, but deeply tired, in a way that sleep couldn't cure. He sat up, slowly in his simple bedding, and looked out at the maple trees that surrounded his hut, their leaves now a brilliant tapestry of red and gold. "Even the trees know how to let go beautifully," he murmured to himself, watching a gentle breeze release dozens of leaves that danced through the air like prayers made visible. Word spread quickly through the nearby villages that Master Ikkyu was approaching his final days. Students, disciples, and admirers gathered at his small hut, filling the garden and spilling onto the mountain paths. They came not with grief, but with gratitude for the opportunity to be present during this sacred transition. Many of them carried writing materials, hoping to record whatever profound, final teaching their master might offer. Surely someone who had spent his entire life pointing toward truth would have something especially meaningful to say at the moment of death. They expected poetry about the nature of existence, or perhaps a final koan that would guide their practice for years to come. For 3 days, Ikkyu received visitors with his usual gentle presence. He told stories, shared jokes, and offered simple observations about the changing weather. But he gave no dramatic speeches about life's meaning or death's significance. He seemed to be treating his approaching death with the same natural acceptance he had brought to everything else, like watching clouds drift across the sky. On the 3rd evening, as the sun set behind the mountains and painted the autumn sky in soft purples and pinks, Ikkyu called his closest students to gather around his bedside. They came with brushes and ink, ready to capture whatever wisdom their teacher might offer in his final moments. "Master," one devoted student said softly, "would you honor us with a death poem, some final words to guide us after you're gone?" Ikkyu smiled at their earnest faces, seeing their love and their very human desire to hold on to something permanent in the midst of inevitable change. He understood their need for special words that might somehow make his passing feel less final, less complete. "Of course," he said gently, and gestured for someone to bring him brush and paper. The students held their breath as their teacher slowly dipped his brush in ink. This would be his final teaching, the culmination of 9 decades of wisdom, the last gift he would leave them. They watched his hand move across the paper with the same careful attention they might give to witnessing a miracle. When Ikkyu finished writing, he set down his brush and looked at his gathered students with eyes full of love. "There," he said simply. That says everything that needs to be said. The students eagerly looked at the paper, expecting to find profound verses about enlightenment, death, or the nature of existence. Instead, in Ikkyu's familiar, flowing handwriting, they read just 5 simple words. Blind donkey eating grass. The students stared at the paper in confusion. Surely there must be more, some hidden meaning they weren't grasping. One brave disciple finally asked, "Master, could you explain what this means? We don't understand." Ikkyu chuckled softly, the sound like water flowing over stones. "What's to understand?" he asked gently. A blind donkey eating grass is doing exactly what it does, completely and naturally, without any self-consciousness or spiritual pretension. It doesn't worry about enlightenment or wonder about its purpose. It simply eats grass because that's what donkeys do. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again to look at each student with infinite tenderness. "I have lived my life like that donkey, doing what came naturally in each moment, without trying to be spiritual or profound. And now I will die the same way, simply and naturally, because that's what old bodies do." That night, as the moon rose full and bright over the autumn mountains, Master Ikkyu died peacefully in his sleep. His students found him the next morning, looking completely at rest, with the faintest smile still playing at the corners of his mouth. Can you feel the profound acceptance in Ikkyu's final teaching? His death poem contained no resistance to the natural order of things, no grasping for immortality, no attempt to make his passing seem more significant than the simple completion of a life fully lived. The Buddha taught, of all footprints, that of the elephant is supreme. Similarly, of all meditative themes, that on death is supreme. Ikkyu understood that contemplating impermanence isn't morbid. It's the key to appreciating life while we have it. Most of us live in denial of life's fundamental impermanence. We structure our days as if they will continue forever, make plans as if change won't touch them, and love as if loss were optional rather than inevitable. This denial creates a subtle tension that colors all our experiences with anxiety about holding on to what cannot be held. But Ikkyu had made friends with impermanence long before his death. He lived each day fully precisely because he knew it was temporary. He loved deeply because he understood that all relationships are brief meetings in the vast space of existence. He appreciated simple pleasures because he never took their availability for granted. His blind donkey represents this complete acceptance of our natural condition. Like that animal eating grass, we are all temporary expressions of life, doing exactly what we do, for exactly as long as we do it. There's no cosmic drama in this. It's simply the way things work. The students who gathered around Ikkyu wanted something special to cling to, some profound words that might ease their grief or provide comfort in his absence. But he gave them something better, permission to accept change as natural rather than tragic. His death poem was really a life poem, showing them how to embrace their own temporary nature with grace. The Buddha said, "Everything that has a beginning has an ending. Make your peace with that, and all will be well." Ikkyu's entire approach to dying demonstrated this peace. He didn't fight against his body's aging or rage against the unfairness of mortality. He simply let his life complete itself as naturally as leaves falling from trees. Think about your own relationship with change and endings. Do you resist the natural cycles of growth and completion in your life? When relationships evolve, jobs end, or chapters close, do you fight against these transitions or flow with them? How much energy do you spend trying to make permanent what is inherently temporary? Ikkyu's teaching invites us to find freedom in accepting our blind donkey nature. We don't need to be enlightened beings having profound experiences. We can simply be humans, doing human things with complete presence and acceptance. Eating when hungry, sleeping when tired, loving when love arises, and eventually dying when death comes. This acceptance doesn't make life meaningless. It makes every moment precious, precisely because it won't last forever. Like Ikkyu watching maple leaves dance in autumn wind, we can appreciate the beauty of temporary things without demanding they become permanent. Tonight, as you rest in the flowing river of this moment, can you feel some of Ikkyu's peaceful acceptance settling into your awareness? Can you sense the relief that comes from not having to fight against the natural changes happening in your life? Can you appreciate this temporary experience of listening, breathing, and being alive without needing it to last forever? The blind donkey eating grass has no regrets about yesterday's grass or anxiety about tomorrow's meal. It simply enjoys the grass that's available right now. Sometimes, the deepest freedom comes not from seeking something more, but from finally being content with what we've always been. There lived a Zen master named Huang Po, whose teaching was so direct and uncompromising that students often left his presence either completely awakened or completely confused. He had no patience for spiritual seeking that became another form of grasping, and he would often shock people by telling them that everything they were looking for was exactly what was preventing them from finding it. Huang Po's monastery attracted seekers from across the empire, all drawn by rumors of his profound wisdom and revolutionary approach to teaching. Unlike other masters who offered gradual practices and encouraging words, Huang Po had a reputation for cutting through years of spiritual effort with a single devastating insight. Many came hoping he would validate their practices. Most left having those same practices completely dismantled. One spring morning, a young monk arrived at Huang Po's gate after walking for 3 months across mountain ranges and through dangerous valleys. His feet were blistered, his robes were worn thin, and his face showed the intensity of someone who had dedicated his entire life to finding enlightenment. He carried with him letters of recommendation from famous teachers and a reputation as one of the most sincere spiritual seekers of his generation. This monk, whose name was Wei Shan, had spent 15 years studying with various masters. He had memorized countless sutras, mastered difficult meditation techniques, and undergone rigorous training in monasteries throughout China. Yet despite all his effort and devotion, he felt no closer to the liberation he sought than when he had first begun his spiritual journey. When Wei Shan was finally granted an audience with Huang Po, he prostrated himself before the master and presented his credentials with trembling hands. "Venerable teacher," he said, "I have come to you as my last hope. I have studied with the greatest masters, practiced the most advanced techniques, and devoted every moment of the past 15 years to finding Buddha nature. Yet I remain as lost and suffering as ever. Please, show me the way to enlightenment." Huang Po looked at this earnest young seeker for a long moment without speaking. His eyes seemed to see through all the layers of spiritual accomplishment and accumulated knowledge to something deeper. Finally, he asked a simple question: "Who is it that seeks enlightenment?" Wei Shan was prepared for this kind of inquiry. He had studied enough philosophy to know the correct answer. "Well, Master, ultimately there is no seeker and nothing to seek. The seeking mind itself is an illusion, and enlightenment is our original nature that was never lost." "Ah," Huang Po nodded, "you have studied well. Now tell me, if there is no seeker and nothing to seek, why have you walked 3 months to find me? If enlightenment is your original nature that was never lost, why are you still looking for it?" Wei Shan felt a familiar frustration rising in his chest. This was the same paradox that had plagued him for years. Intellectually, he understood that seeking was futile, but experientially, he still felt unenlightened. "Master," he said desperately, "I know these things in my mind, but I don't know them in my heart. I understand the concepts, but I haven't realized the truth they point to. How do I bridge this gap between knowing and being?" Huang Po suddenly stood up and began walking around the young monk in slow circles. "Tell me," he said, "right now, as you sit here talking to me, are you enlightened or unenlightened?" Wei Shan hesitated. I feel unenlightened, Master. That's why I've come to you for help." "And this feeling of being unenlightened," Huang Po continued, "where does it come from? Show me your unenlightenment. Point to it. Let me see this thing that troubles you so much." Wei Shan looked around, confused, then inward at his own experience. I can't point to it exactly. It's more like a sense of something missing, a feeling that I should be different than I am." "Ah," Huang Po clapped his hands sharply. "So your unenlightenment is just a thought that you should be different. Tell me, who is aware of this thought?" "I am," Wei Shan replied automatically. "And this I that is aware of thoughts about being unenlightened, is it enlightened or unenlightened?" Wei Shan paused, sensing he was being led somewhere important. I don't know how to answer that." "Of course you don't," Huang Po laughed heartily. "Because the awareness that knows thoughts, feelings, and experiences doesn't fit into categories like enlightened or unenlightened. It simply is. It's been here all along, perfectly aware, never disturbed by your seeking or your finding. Wei Shan felt something beginning to shift in his understanding, like ice starting to crack in spring sunshine. But Master, if this awareness is already perfect, why do I feel so much suffering? Why does life feel so difficult and incomplete? Huang Po sat back down and looked at Wei Shan with infinite compassion. The Buddha taught, life is suffering. The cause of suffering is attachment. The cessation of suffering is possible, and there is a path to this cessation. But tell me, who suffers? I do, Wei Shan said. Show me this I that suffers, Huang Po challenged gently. Is it your body? Your thoughts? Your feelings? Or is it the awareness that observes body, thoughts, and feelings? Wei Shan sat in silence, turning his attention inward with a quality of investigation he had never brought to his experience before. He noticed thoughts arising and passing away. He observed emotions flowing through his body like weather through sky. He felt sensations appearing and disappearing. But underneath all these changing experiences was something constant, the simple awareness that knew them all. The awareness itself doesn't suffer, Wei Shan said slowly, as if making a discovery. It just watches suffering happen. Exactly, Huang Po beamed. Your true nature, this aware presence that you actually are, has never been touched by suffering. Suffering belongs to the story you tell about yourself, not to what you actually are. You have been seeking to become what you have never stopped being. Wei Shan felt tears beginning to flow, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of recognition, like finally seeing your own face in a mirror after years of looking everywhere else. But Master, he whispered, if this is true, why didn't anyone tell me this before? Why have I spent 15 years seeking what was never lost? They did tell you, Huang Po smiled. Every teacher, every sutra, every practice was pointing you back to this simple awareness. But you were so busy seeking that you couldn't hear what they were actually saying. Your very seeking was like a person looking everywhere for their glasses while wearing them. So what do I do now? Wei Shan asked. How do I practice with this understanding? Stop practicing, Huang Po laughed. Stop seeking. Stop trying to become enlightened. Just be the awareness you already are. Let thoughts come and go without making them into problems to solve. Let feelings arise and pass without trying to fix them. Simply rest as the aware presence that needs nothing, lacks nothing, and has never been disturbed by any experience. Can you feel the profound liberation in Huang Po's pointing? He wasn't offering Wei Shan another practice or method. He was revealing that the seeker and the sought were never actually separate. All the spiritual effort, all the searching, all the suffering had been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what we are. The Buddha taught, the cessation of suffering comes through the cessation of craving. But what Huang Po revealed is that even spiritual craving, the desire for enlightenment itself, keeps us trapped in the very seeking that prevents recognition of our true nature. Most of us approach spirituality like Wei Shan, assuming we need to become something different than what we are. We meditate to achieve peace, study to gain wisdom, and practice to attain enlightenment. But all this effort can become another form of the same searching that created our sense of separation in the first place. What Huang Po understood is that awareness itself, the simple fact that you are conscious right now, is already what every spiritual tradition points toward. You don't need to purify it, improve it, or develop it. You only need to recognize it and stop looking for something else. This doesn't mean abandoning all practice or becoming spiritually lazy. It means approaching any practice from the understanding that you are already whole, rather than trying to become whole. Meditation becomes a celebration of awareness, rather than an attempt to achieve a special state. Compassion flows naturally when you recognize the same awareness in everyone. In your daily life, notice when you fall into the seeking mind that creates the very problems it tries to solve. Maybe you're searching for happiness in achievements, relationships, or experiences, while overlooking the contentment available in simple presence. Perhaps you're trying to fix or improve yourself when the awareness that notices what needs fixing is already perfect and untouched. The Buddha said, "You are perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement." This apparent contradiction points to the same truth Huang Po revealed. Your essential nature is already complete, but the stories you tell about yourself can always be held more lightly. Tonight, as you rest in this moment, can you sense the aware presence that Huang Po was pointing toward? Can you feel how this awareness that's reading these words, breathing this breath, resting in this space, has never actually been disturbed by any of your life experiences? Can you recognize that what you've been seeking has been what's been doing the seeking all along? This recognition doesn't require years of practice or special circumstances. It only asks for the simplest shift in attention from what you think you are to what you actually are. And sometimes, this shift happens in the most unexpected places, through the most ordinary encounters. There once lived a Zen master named Sengai, who expressed his wisdom not only through words, but through the gentle strokes of his painting brush. While other teachers relied on complex lectures or rigorous meditation practices, Sengai discovered that sometimes the deepest truths could be captured in a single, simple image that spoke directly to the heart. Sengai's small temple sat at the edge of a bustling market town where merchants, farmers, and travelers created a constant symphony of voices, cartwheels, and daily commerce. The sounds of haggling, children playing, and animals being herded flowed through his windows from dawn until dusk. Rather than seeking a quieter location for his practice, Sengai had chosen to remain in the midst of this beautiful chaos, finding in it the perfect environment for cultivating true peace. Every morning, visitors would find Sengai sitting calmly at his low wooden table, brush in hand, creating simple paintings that somehow contained more wisdom than entire libraries of philosophy. He painted sparrows with just a few graceful strokes, bamboo that swayed with invisible wind, and mountains that seemed to breathe with ancient stillness. People treasured these small works not for their artistic technique, but for the profound peace they seemed to radiate. One particularly chaotic morning, when the market noise had reached fever pitch and even the monks seemed distracted by the commotion outside, a wealthy merchant arrived, seeking Sengai's guidance. This man had built a successful trading empire, but found himself constantly agitated by the demands of business, the pressure of competition, and the endless stream of problems that required his attention. "Master Sengai," the merchant said, bowing respectfully despite his obvious stress, "I have heard that you have found a way to maintain peace, even in the midst of chaos. Please teach me this secret. My mind never stops racing, my heart never feels calm, and I cannot find rest, even in the quietest moments." Sengai listened to the merchant's words, while continuing to prepare his ink and arrange his brushes. Outside, a particularly loud argument had broken out between two vendors, their voices rising above the general din of the marketplace. Dogs were barking, children were shouting, and cartwheels were clattering over cobblestones in a cacophony that would challenge anyone's composure. "You want to learn about peace," Sengai said gently, not raising his voice despite the noise around them. "Tell me, where do you imagine this peace can be found?" The merchant gestured toward the windows where the market chaos was clearly audible. "Surely not here, master. Peace must be found in quiet places, away from all this disturbance. In meditation halls, mountain retreats, or perhaps in the deep silence of night." Sengai smiled and dipped his brush in the black ink. "Watch carefully," he said, and with one smooth, continuous movement, he painted a perfect circle on the white paper before him. The circle was neither too thick nor too thin, neither perfectly round nor obviously imperfect. It seemed to emerge from the paper as naturally as the moon rises in the evening sky. As Sengai painted, something remarkable happened. Despite the continued noise from the market, despite the chaos swirling around them, a profound stillness seemed to emanate from the simple act of creation. The merchant found himself completely absorbed in watching the brush move, his agitation gradually dissolving into something approaching wonder. When the circle was complete, Sengai set down his brush and looked at his visitor with sparkling eyes. "There," he said simply. "Peace." The merchant stared at the circle, confused by its apparent simplicity. "Master, I don't understand." "It's just a circle. How can this show me peace when all around us is noise and chaos?" Sengai pointed to the painted circle. "Look more carefully. This circle contains everything and excludes nothing. The market noise is here. Your worries are here. The chaos of the world is here. But they are all held within this larger space of awareness that remains perfectly still." The merchant looked again, this time with deeper attention. Gradually, he began to understand that the circle wasn't separate from the noise around them. It somehow included it, while remaining undisturbed by it. You see, Sengai continued, most people think peace means the absence of disturbance. They try to escape noise, avoid problems, and control their environment to create perfect conditions. But true peace is like this circle, spacious enough to hold everything without being disturbed by anything. Outside, a merchant's cart overturned, spilling vegetables across the street and creating an even louder commotion. The merchant visitor instinctively tensed, but then looked back at Sengai's circle and noticed something extraordinary. The painted image seemed to remain completely unaffected by the external chaos, holding its perfect stillness, regardless of what happened around it. But Master, the merchant asked, how do I find this inner circle in my daily life? When problems arise and demands press upon me, how do I remember this peace? Sengai picked up his brush again and added a small dot at the center of the circle. This dot represents your awareness, he explained. No matter what storms rage around the circumference of your experience, this center point remains still. You don't create this stillness. You simply remember. It's always been there. The merchant watched as Sengai continued to paint, adding gentle brushstrokes around the circle that somehow enhanced rather than disturbed its essential simplicity. Even as market sounds continued to flow through the windows, he found himself settling into an unfamiliar tranquility. The Buddha's wisdom teaches us that suffering comes from resistance to what is, Sengai said as he worked. When we try to push away noise, control circumstances, or demand that life be different than it is, we create the very agitation we're trying to escape. But when we rest in the circle of awareness that holds everything, we find the peace that was never actually disturbed. The merchant sat in silence for several minutes, absorbing both the visual teaching of the painted circle and the experiential teaching of finding stillness within chaos. Gradually, he noticed that his usual anxiety about business matters felt lighter, held within a larger space that couldn't be touched by temporary concerns. Master, he said finally, may I have this painting to remind me of this teaching? Sengai laughed gently and handed him the brush. The circle is not in the painting, he said kindly. The circle is what you are. Paint your own reminder, and every time you do, you'll remember that peace is not something you achieve. It's something you already contain. Can you feel the profound simplicity in Sengai's teaching? His circle revealed that true peace doesn't depend on external silence, but on recognizing the spacious awareness that holds all experiences without being limited by any of them. Most of us exhaust ourselves trying to create perfect conditions for inner peace. We wait for quiet moments, seek peaceful environments, and attempt to control our circumstances to minimize disturbance. While these efforts can provide temporary relief, they often leave us feeling more agitated when inevitable chaos returns. Buddhist understanding reveals that this approach misses the essential point. Peace is not the opposite of chaos. It's the space in which both chaos and calm can exist without conflict. Like Sengai's circle, Our true nature is vast enough to hold every possible experience while remaining fundamentally undisturbed. Think about your own relationship with external circumstances. How much energy do you spend trying to control your environment to feel peaceful? When does noise, interruption, or unexpected change trigger agitation in you? What would it feel like to rest in Sangai's circle, allowing disturbances to exist within a larger field of acceptance? The dot at the center of Sangai's circle represents something crucial, the still point of awareness that witnesses all experiences without being moved by them. This isn't a location in your body or mind, but rather the simple fact of being conscious. Right now, as market sounds or household noises might be happening around you, there's an aware presence that notices these sounds without being disturbed by them. Ancient Buddhist wisdom calls this the deathless element, the aspect of our experience that remains constant through all changes. Unlike our thoughts, emotions, and circumstances, which flow and transform continuously, this aware presence maintains perfect stillness. Recognizing this inner sanctuary isn't a matter of achieving a special state, but simply noticing what's already here. In practical terms, Sangai's circle teaching invites us to expand our definition of peace. Instead of peace meaning no disturbance, we can discover peace as room for all disturbance. This shift transforms our relationship with difficulty from resistance to embrace, from conflict to inclusion. Tonight, as various sounds and sensations move through your awareness, can you sense the circle of peace that Sangai painted? Can you feel how the awareness that notices these experiences remains perfectly still while holding them all? Can you rest in this spacious center point that needs nothing to change in order to be completely at peace? This inner sanctuary isn't something you create through effort. It's something you recognize through gentle attention. Sometimes, the most profound teachings come not through words, but through the simple recognition of what has always been present, waiting patiently for our return. In 1960s California, a small Japanese Zen master named Suzuki Roshi began teaching meditation to Americans who had never encountered anything like the ancient practices he offered. These students came to him, carrying the weight of Western achievement culture, convinced they needed to master meditation quickly and efficiently, just as they had learned to excel in school and business. But Suzuki Roshi would teach them something revolutionary, that their complete inexperience was actually their greatest spiritual asset. Suzuki Roshi's meditation hall in San Francisco attracted an unusual mix of people. Professors sat next to artists, business executives practiced alongside poets, and former beatniks found themselves sharing cushions with suburban housewives. What united them all was a sincere desire to learn meditation, though most arrived with very definite ideas about what that learning should look like. The students expected systematic instruction, clear benchmarks of progress, and measurable improvements in their meditation skills. They wanted to know if they were doing it right, how long it would take to reach enlightenment, and what advanced practices they could graduate to once they mastered the basics. Many had read books about Zen and came prepared to discuss philosophy and debate the finer points of Buddhist doctrine. But Suzuki Roshi's approach puzzled them completely. Instead of teaching complex techniques or offering advanced practices to accomplished students, he seemed most interested in those who knew absolutely nothing about meditation. He would spend extra time with complete beginners, while sometimes appearing almost indifferent to students who had been practicing for years. One evening, after several months of practice, a dedicated student named David approached Suzuki Roshi with growing frustration. David had been meditating faithfully every day, reading Zen texts, and applying himself with the same determination that had made him successful in his legal career. Yet he felt stuck, confused, and increasingly discouraged about his lack of dramatic progress. "Roshi," David said, using the respectful Japanese term for teacher, "I've been practicing meditation for 6 months now, and I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. I sit every day, but my mind is still noisy. I get distracted constantly, and I don't experience any of the peace or insight I read about in the books. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this practice." Suzuki Roshi looked at David with eyes that sparkled with gentle amusement. "Tell me," he said in his soft, accented English, "when you first came here 6 months ago, how was your meditation?" David thought back to his early experiences. "Well, it was terrible," he admitted. "I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't sit still, my back hurt, and my mind was all over the place. I was completely clueless." "Ah," Suzuki Roshi nodded approvingly. "That sounds like very good meditation." David looked confused. "But Roshi, that was when I didn't know anything. Surely my meditation should be better now that I've been practicing for months?" "Better according to who?" Suzuki Roshi asked gently. "You say your mind was all over the place when you began. Is it different now?" "Well, no," David had to admit. "If anything, I'm more aware of how scattered my thoughts are." "Excellent." Suzuki Roshi clapped his hands together with delight. "You have made wonderful progress. 6 months ago, you didn't even notice your scattered mind. Now, you are aware of it. This awareness is perfect meditation." David sat in silence, trying to understand what his teacher was pointing toward. It felt like everything he thought he knew about progress and improvement was being turned upside down. "You see," Suzuki Roshi continued, "you came here 6 months ago with perfect beginner's mind. You had no expectations, no ideas about how meditation should feel, no standards to measure yourself against. You just sat down and experienced whatever was there to experience. This is the most advanced practice possible." "But I felt so lost and confused," David protested. "Yes," Suzuki Roshi smiled even more broadly. "Don't know mind is very important. When you know something, your mind is closed to new possibilities. When you don't know, your mind is open, like empty sky. Everything can appear in empty sky." He gestured toward the other students sitting in meditation around the hall. Look at those who have been practicing for many years. They have so many ideas about what good meditation should feel like. They compare today's sitting with yesterday's, judge their progress, and worry about whether they're doing it correctly. Their expert mind has become their biggest obstacle. David began to see what his teacher meant. In trying to become a good meditator, he had lost the fresh openness he'd brought to his first sessions. He had traded wonder for worry, curiosity for criteria. But Roshi, David asked, how do I get back to that beginner's mind? How do I unlearn what I think I know? Suzuki Roshi's eyes twinkled with mischief. Very easy, he said. Just sit down like you never sat before. Breathe like you never breathed before. Every moment, your meditation is completely fresh and new. There is no such thing as experienced meditator, only this moment's beginner. Over the following weeks, David experimented with this radical approach. Instead of evaluating his meditation sessions, he tried to approach each one with genuine curiosity about what would happen. Instead of comparing his current state with past experiences, he attempted to meet each breath, each sensation, each thought, as if encountering it for the very first time. To his surprise, this shift in attitude transformed his practice completely. When he stopped trying to be a good meditator and simply became curious about the actual experience of sitting quietly, a natural ease began to emerge. The pressure to progress disappeared, replaced by a gentle interest in whatever was actually happening right now. Months later, when new students came to the meditation hall, looking nervous and apologetic about their inexperience, David watched Suzuki Roshi's face light up with the same joy he had once found puzzling. Now he understood why his teacher treasured beginners so much. They carried with them the precious gift of not knowing that everyone else was trying so hard to rediscover. Can you feel the liberating wisdom in Suzuki Roshi's teaching? He revealed that what we typically consider our weakness, not knowing what we're doing, is actually the doorway to authentic spiritual practice. In Zen tradition, this fresh, open awareness is called Shoshin, beginner's mind. Ancient teachings remind us that, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind, there are few. Suzuki Roshi understood that the moment we think we know how meditation should go, we close ourselves off from the infinite possibilities available in each moment. This principle extends far beyond formal meditation practice. In every area of life, our accumulated knowledge and expertise can become barriers to fresh perception and genuine learning. We develop habitual ways of seeing, thinking, and responding that filter out the newness constantly available in ordinary experience. Think about activities you've been doing for years, perhaps driving, cooking, or conversations with close family members. How often do you approach these experiences with the same open curiosity you might bring to something completely unfamiliar? When did you last taste your morning coffee as if trying it for the first time? Or really listen to a loved one's voice as if hearing its unique qualities freshly. Beginner's mind doesn't require us to become ignorant or forget our skills and knowledge. Rather, it invites us to hold our expertise lightly, remaining open to discoveries that our preconceptions might otherwise prevent us from noticing. The experienced gardener who can still marvel at each unique flower, the veteran teacher who remains curious about every new student, these people have cultivated the art of expert beginner's mind. Buddhist wisdom reveals that this fresh perspective is always available because each moment truly is unprecedented. This breath you're taking right now has never happened before and will never happen again. The specific quality of awareness you're experiencing as you listen to these words is completely unique in the history of the universe. When we recognize this fundamental newness of each moment, beginner's mind becomes not just a spiritual practice, but a recognition of reality itself. Ancient teachers understood that enlightenment is not a destination we reach through accumulated wisdom, but a way of seeing that's available whenever we drop our preconceptions about what we already know. Tonight, as you rest in this moment of listening, can you feel some of that beginner's mind that Suzuki Roshi treasured so much? Can you approach the simple experience of breathing, of being aware, of settling into rest, as if discovering these things for the very first time? Can you let go of any ideas about how relaxation should feel, and simply remain curious about how it actually feels right now? This fresh eyes approach doesn't require effort or technique. It simply asks for the willingness to not know, even about experiences we think we understand completely. And in this not knowing, there's often space for the most unexpected forms of wisdom to take root and flourish. There lived a young Japanese monk named Dogen who had traveled all the way to China in search of true enlightenment. He had studied for years in Japanese monasteries, mastering every text and technique available, yet something essential still felt missing from his understanding. Determined to find what he sought, he made the dangerous journey across the sea to study with the legendary Chinese Zen masters, who were said to possess the deepest wisdom. Dogen arrived at Tiantong Monastery with high hopes and burning questions. He had heard that Chinese Zen was more direct and profound than anything he had encountered in Japan, and he threw himself into the rigorous training with complete dedication. Every day he sat in meditation for hours, studied with intense concentration, and pushed himself to achieve the breakthrough that would finally satisfy his spiritual hunger. Years passed, and while Dogen gained respect for his sincerity and diligence, the great awakening he sought continued to elude him. He could discuss philosophy with the most learned scholars, his meditation posture was perfect, and his understanding of Buddhist doctrine was encyclopedic. Yet despite all his accomplishments, he still felt like something crucial was missing, some final piece that would complete the puzzle of his understanding. His teacher, Master Ru Jing, was a peculiar man who seemed more interested in ordinary activities than dramatic spiritual experiences. While Dogen asked profound questions about the nature of enlightenment, Ru Jing would often respond by talking about sweeping floors or preparing vegetables. When Dogen sought guidance about advanced meditation techniques, his master might instead comment on the way morning light fell across the monastery garden. This frustrating pattern continued until one unremarkable morning, when everything changed in the most ordinary way possible. Dogen had been sitting in meditation since before dawn, as was his custom, wrestling with the same questions that had plagued him for years. His back ached, his legs were stiff, and his mind felt no closer to the enlightenment he desperately sought. When the morning sitting period ended, Dogen remained on his cushion, feeling defeated and discouraged. Other monks filed out to begin their daily work, but he sat there, staring at the floor, wondering if he would ever understand what all the teachings were pointing toward. The meditation hall gradually emptied until only he and Master Rujing remained. "Still sitting?" Rujing asked gently, approaching Dogen's cushion. "Master," Dogen said without looking up, "I've been practicing for so many years, studying so intensely, sitting so many hours, but I still don't feel enlightened. I still don't understand what the Buddha realized under the Bodhi tree. What am I missing? What more do I need to do?" Rujing sat down quietly beside his student. "Tell me," he said conversationally, "what did you accomplish during your meditation this morning?" Dogen finally looked up, his face showing the strain of years of spiritual striving. "Nothing," he said with obvious disappointment. "I just sat there. My mind wandered, my body was uncomfortable, and I didn't have any insights or special experiences. I feel like I've wasted another morning." "Ah," Rujing nodded, with what appeared to be satisfaction. "So you just sat. Tell me, while you were just sitting, what happened to your eyes?" Dogen touched his face reflexively, confused by the strange question. "My eyes? Nothing happened to them. They remained horizontal, I suppose." "And your nose?" Rujing continued with the same matter-of-fact tone. "My nose?" Dogen felt even more puzzled. "It stayed vertical, as always." "Excellent." Rujing clapped his hands together with genuine delight. "You have thoroughly learned that eyes are horizontal and nose is vertical. This is the most profound accomplishment possible." Dogen stared at his teacher, certain the old man was making fun of him. "Master, I don't understand what you mean. Everyone knows that eyes are horizontal and noses are vertical. That's just ordinary reality. How can this be enlightenment?" "Exactly," Rujing's eyes sparkled with joy. "Ordinary reality is enlightenment. You have been looking everywhere for something special, something extraordinary, something different from what you already are. But what you seek is this very ordinariness that you keep dismissing as insufficient." Something began to shift in Dogen's understanding, like clouds slowly parting to reveal sky that had always been there. "But Master, if this ordinary sitting is already enlightenment, why do we practice at all? Why all the effort and study?" "We practice," Rujing said gently, "not to become enlightened, but to express the enlightenment that is already our true nature. When you sit, you are not trying to achieve Buddhahood. You are already expressing Buddhahood. Your eyes being horizontal and your nose being vertical is Buddha sitting as you. Dogen felt something profound settling in his chest, not a dramatic revelation, but more like finally relaxing after holding his breath for years. So when I just sit, without gaining anything or accomplishing anything special, this itself is complete. When you just sit, you are the Buddha's enlightenment continuing itself through your particular body and mind, Rujing replied. There is nothing to add, nothing to improve, nothing to become. The sitting itself is the point, not what the sitting produces. In that moment, Dogen understood what would later become his revolutionary teaching of shikantaza, just sitting. Not sitting to achieve something, not sitting to become enlightened, not sitting to solve problems or gain insights. Simply sitting as an expression of the Buddha nature that was never absent, never broken, never in need of improvement. Years later, when Dogen returned to Japan and began teaching, students would ask him about his great awakening in China. They expected to hear about dramatic visions, profound insights, or mystical experiences that had transformed his understanding. Instead, he would tell them about learning that eyes are horizontal and noses are vertical. This is the deepest teaching, he would explain to confuse students. You are already exactly what you need to be. Your ordinary mind, your imperfect sitting, your everyday awareness, this is Buddha appearing as you. Practice is not about becoming someone else, but about being completely who you already are. Can you feel the profound relief in Dogen's discovery? After years of seeking something extraordinary, he realized that the ordinary functioning of his body and mind was already the enlightenment he had traveled across oceans to find. Most of us approach spiritual practice like Dogen initially did, as a project of self-improvement, designed to transform us into something better than what we currently are. We meditate to become more peaceful, study to become wiser, and practice to become more enlightened. This approach, while well-intentioned, can turn spirituality into another form of striving that keeps us disconnected from what we actually are. Ancient Buddhist understanding reveals what Dogen discovered through his teacher's simple pointing, that awakening is not about becoming different, but about recognizing what we've always been. The awareness that's reading these words right now, the consciousness that notices thoughts and sensations arising and passing, the simple fact of being alive and present, this is already Buddha nature expressing itself completely. The practice of just sitting that emerged from Dogen's insight revolutionized Zen practice. Instead of using meditation as a means to achieve something else, shikantaza invites us to sit without agenda, without goal, without trying to get anywhere or become anyone. It's meditation as expression rather than meditation as technique. This approach extends far beyond formal sitting practice. In any moment, we can practice just being, allowing ourselves to be exactly as we are, without the constant inner pressure to improve, achieve, or become something different. Just walking when walking, just eating when eating, just listening when listening, without the overlay of self-improvement projects. Wisdom teachings remind us that you are perfect as you are, and you could use a little improvement. This apparent paradox points to the same truth Dogen discovered. Our essential nature is already complete, even as our human experience continues to unfold and change. We can work on ourselves and care for our growth while resting in the understanding that our worth isn't dependent on these improvements. Think about your own relationship with self-acceptance. How often do you experience the simple contentment of being exactly as you are right now? When do you feel the pressure to be different, better, more advanced, or somehow improved? What would it feel like to approach your life from Dogen's horizontal eyes, vertical nose perspective, recognizing the completeness of ordinary reality? Tonight, as you rest in this moment, can you sense what Dogen discovered in that Chinese meditation hall? Can you feel how the simple fact of being aware, of breathing, of existing exactly as you are, is already complete and perfect? Can you experience the relief of not needing to become anything other than what you already are? This recognition doesn't eliminate the possibility of growth, learning, or positive change. It simply removes the desperate quality that makes self-improvement feel like survival rather than play. When we rest in our basic okayness, change happens more naturally and joyfully. The horizontal eyes and vertical nose that Dogen celebrated are with you right now, just as they were with him centuries ago. And sometimes this most obvious truth can be the hardest one to truly receive. In ancient China, there lived a Zen master named Baso, whose understanding of balance was so profound that people came from distant provinces, not just to hear his teachings, but to watch how he moved through the world with perfect equilibrium. Everything he did seemed to embody a mysterious harmony between effort and ease, between caring deeply and holding lightly. Students often wondered how he had developed such natural grace in all his actions. Baso had not always possessed this quality of effortless balance. As a young monk, he had swung wildly between extremes, sometimes practicing with such fierce intensity that he exhausted himself completely, other times becoming so relaxed that his practice lost all focus and direction. It was through learning the ancient art of archery that he finally discovered what would become his most important teaching. The master who taught Baso archery was an old man who had spent 60 years perfecting not just his aim, but his understanding of how force and gentleness could work together in perfect harmony. This teacher, Master Wu, had watched countless students struggle with the same fundamental mistake. They approached archery as if it required choosing between power and delicacy, when the true art lay in discovering how these apparent opposites could become one seamless action. On Baso's first day of archery training, Master Wu handed him a simple wooden bow and a single arrow. "Before you worry about hitting any target," the old master said, "you must learn the most important lesson the bow can teach. Watch carefully." Master Wu took his own bow and drew it slowly, his weathered hands moving with the fluid precision of someone who had repeated this motion thousands of times. As he pulled the string back, Baso could see every muscle in the old man's body engaged with focused intention. The effort was complete, total, holding nothing back. But then, at the moment of release, something extraordinary happened. Master Wu's grip on the string simply opened, without any force or pushing, as if his fingers had become like flower petals naturally opening in sunlight. The arrow flew with perfect trajectory toward a distant target, striking the center with a soft thud that seemed to arise from the silence itself. "Did you see?" Master Wu asked, lowering his bow. Baso nodded, though he wasn't sure what exactly he was supposed to have noticed. "Your aim was perfect, Master." "Forget the target," Wu replied gently. "What did you observe about the relationship between drawing and releasing?" Baso thought carefully before answering. "You drew the bow with complete effort, but you released the string without any effort at all." "Exactly." Wu's eyes lit up with approval. "Complete effort, complete letting go. If you draw the bow weakly, the arrow has no power. If you release with force, you disturb the arrow's natural flight. The way of the archer is to give everything to the drawing and nothing to the releasing." Over the following months, Baso practiced this principle daily. At first, his attempts were clumsy and unbalanced. Sometimes, he would draw the bow with such fierce determination that his entire body became rigid, making a smooth release impossible. Other times, he would focus so much on gentle releasing that his draw lacked the power necessary to send the arrow anywhere useful. Master Wu would watch these struggles with patient understanding. "You are trying to be either strong or gentle," he would observe. "The middle way of archery requires you to be both strong and gentle simultaneously. This is not a compromise between two extremes. It is a third way that transcends the apparent contradiction." Gradually, through countless hours of practice, Baso began to understand what his teacher meant. The middle way wasn't about finding some lukewarm position between hot and cold, but about discovering how opposites could dance together in perfect harmony. He learned to draw his bow with the focused intensity of a mountain, while keeping his mind as open and flowing as a river. One autumn morning, after nearly a year of training, something shifted in Baso's practice. As he drew his bow, he felt his entire being gathering into focused intention, yet without any sense of strain or forcing. When the moment came to release, his fingers opened like gates responding to flowing water, and the arrow seemed to release itself. The arrow struck the center of the target, but Baso barely noticed. What captured his attention was the profound sense of balance he had just experienced, the feeling of acting with complete commitment while remaining completely free. In that moment, he understood that he had learned something far more valuable than archery. "Master Wu," Baso said, setting down his bow with new reverence, "this teaching isn't really about archery, is it?" The old master smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose student had finally grasped the essential point. "Tell me what you've discovered." "This is how to live," Basso said slowly, as the implications continued to unfold in his understanding. "We can engage completely with life while holding our outcomes lightly. We can care deeply without becoming attached to results. We can give our full effort while trusting the natural flow of things." "Yes," Wu nodded. "And what happens when people try to live at the extremes instead of finding this middle way?" Basso reflected on his own past struggles and those he had observed in fellow monks. When we put forth no effort, nothing meaningful happens. When we force outcomes, we create suffering and resistance. But when we combine complete effort with complete letting go, action becomes effortless and effective. Years later, when Basso became a teacher himself, students would often ask him about the secret of his remarkable balance in all situations. Whether he was meditating, teaching, working in the garden, or simply walking across the courtyard, he moved with the same harmonious integration of strength and softness they had observed in Master Wu's archery. To these students, Basso would often demonstrate his understanding through actual archery lessons. "Watch carefully," he would say, drawing his bow with obvious full engagement while keeping his face completely relaxed. The Buddha's wisdom teaches us that the middle way avoids the extremes of self-indulgence and self-mortification. But this is not a grey compromise. It is a dynamic balance that includes the full spectrum of life. One day, a particularly intellectual student challenged this teaching. "Master Basso, how can we give complete effort while letting go completely? These seem like contradictory instructions that cancel each other out." Basso handed the student a bow and arrow. "Show me the contradiction," he said simply. The student attempted to draw the bow while mentally trying to let go at the same time. His movements became confused and ineffective, the arrow wobbling weakly toward the ground. "You are thinking about effort and letting go as separate mental concepts," Basso observed kindly. "But in actual practice, they are not two different things happening at different times. They are one seamless action, like breathing in and breathing out." He took the bow and demonstrated again, this time narrating his experience. "As I draw, every fiber commits to this action, but without grasping or desperation. As I release, the commitment continues, but without controlling what happens next. The effort and the letting go are like two wings of the same bird." Can you feel the profound wisdom in this archery teaching? Basso had discovered that the middle way isn't about avoiding intensity or passion, but about engaging fully while remaining inwardly free. Most of us live at exhausting extremes. We either care so much about outcomes that we become anxious and controlling, or we detach so completely that our actions lose power and purpose. We swing between forcing situations and being completely passive, between gripping tightly and not caring at all. But the middle way that Basso learned through archery offers a third possibility. We can commit ourselves wholeheartedly to our work, relationships, and goals while holding the results lightly. We can care deeply about others without trying to control their choices. We can pursue our dreams with passion while accepting whatever outcomes actually arise. This balance transforms the quality of our entire experience. When we engage with Basso's archer-like balance, action becomes more effective because it flows from centered awareness rather than desperate attachment. We can be fully present with difficulties without being overwhelmed by them. We can celebrate successes without becoming dependent on them for our sense of worth. Think about areas in your life where you might be living at extremes. Perhaps you're so concerned about a relationship's future that you can't enjoy its present reality. Maybe you care so much about work outcomes that the stress diminishes your actual performance. Or you might have become so protective of your peace that you've withdrawn from meaningful engagement altogether. The Buddha's teaching reveals that suffering often comes from these extreme positions rather than from life's circumstances themselves. When we find the middle way that Basso embodied, we discover we can be fully human, feeling deeply, caring, completely, engaging wholeheartedly, while maintaining the inner freedom that allows us to respond wisely rather than react blindly. Tonight, as you prepare to complete this journey through these ancient stories, can you sense the archer's balance that Basso discovered? Can you feel how you might hold your own life circumstances with the same complete engagement and complete freedom? Can you imagine approaching tomorrow with the archer's way, drawing your bow of attention and effort fully, while releasing your arrows of action with perfect trust? This is perhaps the most practical wisdom these 13 stories have offered. The understanding that we don't have to choose between caring and freedom, between effort and ease, between engagement and peace. Like the master archer, we can embody all of these qualities simultaneously, finding in their integration a way of living that is both fully human and deeply wise. As we draw our time together to a close, let us reflect on the journey we've taken through these ancient stories of wisdom. 13 gentle teachings have unfolded like flowers opening in morning sunlight, each offering its own gift for the peaceful heart. We walked with Dogen as his manuscripts scattered on mountain winds, learning that true treasures live not in what we create, but in who we are. Bankei showed us how to remain centered when storms arise, finding peace not in the absence of chaos, but in awareness that stays undisturbed. Sagan taught us, we don't have to burn just because life brings fire. Patient Joshu reminded us that wisdom ripens in its own season. Ikkyu revealed the freedom of needing less to feel complete, and Ryokan showed us that compassion is our most natural state. Through Dongshan's 3 pounds of flax, we discovered the sacred hiding in ordinary moments. Huang Po freed us from endless seeking by revealing we are already what we've been trying to become. Sengai's circle showed us the spacious awareness that holds all experiences without being limited by any. Suzuki Roshi celebrated not knowing as the doorway to wonder. Dogen's horizontal eyes revealed that enlightenment is being exactly what we are. And Baso's archery taught us to engage fully while holding outcomes lightly. These teachers from across centuries discovered the same essential truth. Freedom comes not from changing circumstances, but from changing our relationship to whatever arises. Thank you for sharing this journey, for bringing your seeking heart to this ancient conversation. From Moonmine Temple, where wisdom flows like moonlight through all who remember their original peace, we offer this blessing. May you rest peacefully tonight, knowing everything you need for happiness already lives within you. May you wake refreshed, carrying the gentle strength of these timeless teachings. The moon that Ryokan wished he could give shines on you now, offering its light freely to all who remember how to receive it. Rest well, dear friend. The wisdom lives on in you.